Welcome to Making Comics, a podcast exploring the comics process from 3 different perspectives this week. I am Keith Foster. I write the comics Kadoja, Animals, and 3 Protectors.
And I'm Scott Loss, the creator and artist of The Second Shift, Wanderers of Melisande, Paradise Hills, and Granite for the Accidental Aliens.
Yes, and we have a special guest this week, a person that I am thrilled to call a former collaborator of mine, a co-collaborator on both Kadoja and 3 Protectors, but a person who has done a bunch of amazing things in his own right. Welcome, Rory Smith.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast. I was saying to Keith a minute ago, this is my first time doing a podcast, so I'm a little nervous, but
that's okay. So so thank you for coming on. Thank you for letting this be the beginning of your podcast journey. And this really rose from the fact that we've been talking a lot as of recently, right? On when we've met at conventions, and you've come over to our table, and then you've been like, we have these amazing, interesting conversations full of questions and answers and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's why we wanted to have you on. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited to be here. Let's go.
Yeah. So something we talked about first. Scott just kind of casually flashed his beer while he was drinking it, which means it is time for our tradition of what are you drinking? So what are you drinking this episode, Scott?
All right, I'm going a little hard in the paint today. So it is Asylum Belgian style triple ale. It's from San Clemente, California, Left Coast Brewing Company. And this is, I can read.
I think it's 8%.
Yeah, I know it's pretty high. Where the frickin' frack is it?
Great.
All right. Well, hey, Keith, I'm going to look for that. What are you drinking?
I am drinking something that I've drank before, but I wanted to bust it out here. This is the Ube Macapuno Delight Ube Chocolate Coconut Porter. It is 8.2%. You can see it right there. And we've talked about this on a couple of recent episodes of the podcast, but I love it. And I had one around and I wanted to have it. So Rory, we didn't give you enough of a heads up. I think you're having seltzer.
Well, yeah,
water.
I didn't have any beer at home on hand or wine or anything, but so I'm just having a nice cold buble tonight. This is let me see, it's 8% bubbles, and the rest is all blackberry flavor. There you go.
Okay, blackberry.
Cheers.
I found it.
Yeah. Mazel tov.
It's like a dark blue on a blue can, so you can barely see it. It's 11.8.
My lord.
It's a triple.
That is Shaquille O'Neal hard in the paint right there. This is going to be a good podcast. Before we get started,
can you dig
it? Tell me about the stuff that we see behind you here. What do you have kind of decorating the wall behind you in the studio there?
Well, this is some of my toy collection is back here. This is mostly like my vintage toys, like all the stuff that I was into as a kid. We got a bunch of Ninja Turtles. There's some Pee-wee's Playhouse stuff up there. There's Power Rangers, there's Thundercats. There's some, Batman figures. There's a couple NES games, He-Man, the G.I. Joe Street Fighter figures. Just sort of like a mix of a bunch of different things.
Wow.
And I have a lot more stuff in my storage unit.
Yeah, see the Megazord.
Okay.
Yeah. A couple of Megazords.
Yeah, that's cool. What
I love, what some of my
toys were there?
What'd you say? What Pee-wee?
No, go ahead. You first. Yeah, what Pee-wee's toys? You said Pee-wee's Playhouse? What toys are those?
Yeah, up there, they're like action figures. There's Pee-wee, Cherry, this magic screen, Terry. I also have, there's like a big play set that's Pee-wee's Playhouse that I have like underneath some stuff in there. These are some of my favorites. Okay. Have you seen these? These are Shogun Warriors. These are
nice. Yes, man. Yes.
These are some of my favorites.
How many of those do you have?
They're like, I only have 2 of them. They're like cheap hollow plastic, but they're like giant and really cool. And
that's Guy King. I mean, that one's awesome. What's the other one?
Too.
Oh, yes, Ray
Dean.
Dean.
Is Ray Dean? Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Very, very cool. Those things are ultimate. Well, hold on.
Do you have a couple? Let's see.
I
bring something out.
This is the Super 7 Shogun Warrior sized Boba Fett, which cool.
I love that.
I actually did buy some vintage ones, but I've sort of cycled through those and kept one. And so the one I decided was, a 3-year-old Shogun style Boba Fett.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's it's super cool.
And they also
cool.
have a Godzilla. Have you seen the Godzilla
Shogun
Warrior?
Yes,
that one's very hard to find.
It's hard to find, but if you're cheap and you like things small scale, then Super 7 actually did small scale versions of the OG Shogun Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
This is obviously the Fire version. So that's fun for people on a budget that don't want to just devote money and space to a 2-foot tall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hell yeah. All right, well, let's get started. So, we like to talk about at least something we did from a craft standpoint last week. So Scott, why don't you set it off, man? What was the main thing that you did last week from a craft point of view?
Well, I got a couple of pages of Wanderers of Melisande done. So it's funny, it was a nice bounce back week. So last week I was only able to get 1 page done, and I talked about that. It was just like, hey, it was kind of a struggle this week. There's a lot of stuff going on. Immediately after we recorded that, I knocked a page out, and throughout the week I ended up knocking another page out and a couple more panels. So two pages, 2 panels this week. So not too shabby. I'm working my way back up to 3 to 4 pages a week, and we'll see if I can keep that trend and just kind of keep building them up and knocking them out as fast as I can, because after the pencil and ink stage with Wanderers specifically, I have to do the gray tones, the zipatones. So it's double duty as far as like what I'm used to doing on Second Shift or Paradise Hills. And granted, it's just like, okay, well, the zipatones act as the color for the page. So you have to figure out the light source and all of those things. And, it's very time consuming. It's mentally like for an artist, or at least for me, Rory, I don't know how it is for you. So like when I'm in the pencil and ink stage, that's the stage I'm in. And so it's hard for me to kind of just switch over to doing, like the zipatones, the screen tones, trying to figure out the light source on things. And it always takes me a couple of weeks to kind of get used to that headspace. And then once I get used to it, then I'm rolling pretty good.
Okay. So, but I mean, that's still a pretty productive week, man. I mean, almost 3 pages. I know you're setting the 3-page goal as this, old standard that you're trying to get back to, but there's nothing wrong with 2 and change pages, right? That's incredible.
Yeah, no, I felt pretty good about it. I was happy that it wasn't 1 page. That's for sure. Last week I felt a little down on that. I was like, I got only 1 page done. And it's not like Wanderers have massive amounts of panels per page. It's 4 panels per page, or it's a splash or a single double page splash. So that's kind of the rhythm of what Wanderers is. And, to only get 1 page done is just like, dude, what are you even doing this week? It's just there's 7 days. You should have at least 7 panels done. So so to be able to bounce back is pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, so what were you drawing this time? What was on the 2 pages? Was it action? Was it kind of talking? A hybrid of both? What did that look like?
It was an action page. I guess 2 action pages. I'd say 1.5. The other one was kind of like a pause in time. So it was, it was relatively easy to draw the second page. And but the first page was action packed. But I've gotten to the point where I can just go over the skeleton of the image and like detail the clothing and everything like that. It could just be the human body. And I'm like, okay, well, I know what this character's clothing is like, and I can just start drawing single lines of the characters. And so, it's a nice place to be in, and it definitely helps with the speed. And that's the thing I think I've noticed with my speed in production. It's just like, oh, okay, you don't really necessarily need to sketch every single thing out. You know what these characters' costumes look like. You've drawn them 1,000 times. Just draw it. And so getting into that headspace has helped a lot, and it's really sped me up.
Nice. Rory, how do you?
Is that sort of? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to ask. Is that sort of how your drawing process works? Like when you're doing your rough pencils, do you keep your roughs like very rough because in your mind like what you intend? So when you go into your inking stage, you just all you need is like a really rough guideline. You don't do tight pencils, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it depends. It depends what I'm drawing. And usually if it's my characters, I can go in pretty rough because I have I've been drawing them long enough to where I know what their facial features look like and stuff like that, their costuming. But I have a 3-stage process, so I'll do the thumbnails. Sometimes they're really tight, or like not tight, but they're pretty well formed, and sometimes they're very stick figure-ish, and or just fast, just blasting them out. It's like, okay, I got a rough idea of what this page is going to look like. Okay, boom, that's done, and then I'll move on to the next page, and I do the thumbnail process first, and then when I decide to go onto pages, or depending if I do this thing I invented. It's called the Slack method. So essentially, I work on multiple pages at the same time. So I have a thumbnail spreadsheet digitally, and so I'll thumbnail everything out. And then after that, I'll look around and I'll be like, what do I feel like drawing? And if I feel like starting,
I do that sometimes too.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so I'll kind of pick what I feel like drawing, and I'm like, well, this looks like it's fun, or depending the time of day, like how much time do I have? I'm like, well, this looks fast. I can do this one. So I'll jump around, and in that process, I'll just start working away at the pages and getting nice structure, just the skeleton of the body, just like the shape of the body. And if I have that down, then yeah, I can just go in and just start detailing. Okay, here's his ear, and all of that. So especially with Wanderers, which is more of an organic book, everything, because it takes place like on another planet 1,000 years in the future where anthropomorphic dinosaurs live. So a lot of it is imaginative. So it's like, okay, I can go a little free form, and if things look a little, off, it's okay, because that's kind of the world that they're in. And so I found that to be my process more so often with Wanderers than I would say Second Shift. But Second Shift is the same thing. If I got the figure down, then I can detail the heck out of it like straight away. It's just like, okay, I don't really need that much. As long as I know where the character's looking and the body positioning, if all that's lined up, then I can just go straight in with detail and the inking part of it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I do want to bring something up. I forgot to mention this because I was so excited to get to the beers. But here is Rory's most recent comic. I'm going to kind of do this. This is The Mighty Hunters of Mithria. Right? What's this, about a year old, Rory? Something like that?
There we go. Yes,
I need to get my
matchy match.
Yeah, about a year ago is when I finished it. Yeah, so this is like my first graphic novel that I did like all on my own, and it's very He-Man inspired in terms of like the universe that it's set in and the way that the characters look. It sort of started like I had this story idea that was bouncing around in my brain. And originally I was thinking of, it was going to be set in like a futuristic city type of setting. But I was kind of not feeling that excited about it. And then one day I kind of had this thought of like, oh, what if I instead like took this story and set it in like a Masters of the Universe type of world. And I made all the characters look like all these action figures that I loved when I was a kid. And they're all like big and muscular and bright colors and all that sort of stuff. And as soon as I had that thought, I got really excited about it. And ever since that moment, I've been like really excited about working on it, and have just had a lot of fun drawing it every step of the way. It took me like 3 years to make this 200-page graphic novel, mainly just because it took a long time, just because that's like the thing that I'm doing on the side for fun. Like I work full-time as a storyboard artist in animation. That's my full-time day job. And making comics is my part-time side job. Well, not really a job, just something I do for fun.
Yeah. Well, so I got a couple questions here. The first one is around like what Scott was talking about with Wanderers of Melisandre, right? Like, did you feel the same thing in your world, that because it's a fantasy world, you don't have to really hold yourself too much to laws of the universe? Like, where were you on that? Was it fun to just sort of create whatever you wanted, knowing it was a fantasy world?
Yes, definitely. Yes, I totally understand what Scott's saying 100%. Like being able to sort of set your story in a fantasy world where everything's made up. Yeah, you don't have to worry about if being totally accurate. If you're trying to, if I'm making a more realistic comic and I want to draw a motorcycle, it's like, now I got to look up some reference images for motorcycles so that I draw it the right way. But if I'm working in a fantasy world, I can just kind of make up how this fantasy motorcycle will look like. It doesn't have to necessarily make sense or look how you would think it's supposed to look. It can just look kind of funky and cool. So definitely.
Interesting. It's funny that you mentioned your book is kind of like, it's, like He-Man and all the other toys that I like. It's kind of a combination of those things. Where Wanderers is my quick pitch on it, or one of my quick pitches. It's like Avatar: The Last Airbender meets He-Man with a splash of Akira. So, and it was the same thing. It was like, okay, I have this futuristic story where it's, okay, humans have left the Earth. They're going to other planets. They're colonizing other planets. Okay, so that's all space, and and it's just like, I'm not excited about that part. But let's get to the planet where the dinosaurs are, and they're very low tech. It's just like the beginning of the world for them. So it's just like the same thing. It was like, that's exciting. That sounds like it's going to be real fun to draw, and it's just such a difference. Like you pointed out, like a motorcycle or something like that. Second Shift is all in the real world. It's there's buildings, cars, motorcycles everywhere, where Wanderers was a nice balance, because it's like, well, you don't have to worry about that shit. You don't need a ruler. Like, don't worry about it. Just have fun. Just do your thing.
When you're describing like the space part and the dinosaur part, it's like my immediate thought is like, oh yeah, I want to work on the dinosaur part. Like, give me that assignment. That's what I want to draw, the dinosaur world. That's the fun stuff.
It sounds like straight edges are kind of the enemy. Right? Like any, is that right?
Free. Let my hand flow free, If
I can get away from them, I will, that's for sure.
Yeah, I hear you.
Do you draw on paper?
Oh no, go ahead.
I work primarily digitally now.
Okay.
So
yeah, me too.
It was such a jump. I think the iPad 2 had just come out, and I managed to talk two of my studio mates into buying the new iPad, and they already had iPads. And I was like, oh man, I heard the 2's coming out. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, I heard, it's kind of a jump up from the first edition. And they're like, yeah, I'm thinking about getting it. And I was like, oh, I think that's a great idea. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, hey, if you want to sell your first one, I'll gladly buy it off of you. And so that's what ended up happening. My studio mate was just like, hey, were you serious? Would you buy my iPad 1 off of me? I was like, iPad Pro. And I was like, totally. Like, I was like, how much do you want it for, though? And she's like,
you're talking about iPad Pro. I thought you were talking about the original iPad, the first
I'm sorry, no.
iPad. That's what I thought you were talking about.
No. Sketch. Yeah.
I actually did buy that secondhand off of someone too, actually. And I used one of those old school stylus with like a rubber tip. And I was actually drawing on that. I mean, it was real crude, but I actually did like some client work on it, and they were like, wow, this is awesome. I'm like, okay, awesome. Yeah. But getting the first iPad Pro, it was a second hand off of one of my studio mates, and she charged me $200, and it was like literally like a year and a half old. And I was like, that's wild. So, but since then, the productivity just jumped, like when you're drawing by hand with everything, if you have a character that's just too much, like 1 inch to the right, and you just want to move them over a little bit to the left, it's like you got to erase it and redraw it. This is just like circle, drag. Okay, they're where you need it to be, and resizing is so much quicker. So
much more efficient.
So basically, since the iPad Pro 2 came out, I've been working digitally.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said. It's something we've touched on before, right? About the nostalgia for the old tools and the love to work on the old tools. But sometimes you have to go back. Sometimes going back to the old tools is just fun, right? Like in you guys' case, Scott, I know recently you just did some drawings on paper, like old times.
I felt like I was like, a caveman.
Yeah. Keith, do you ever? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's totally fun to jump back, to the old tools, and just like, oh man, I forgot what this is like. And there is as much as, and Rory, tell me if you find this to be the same thing. Like, I find that there's lines I can get with a paper and pencil that it's not as great digitally. Do you feel like that too? Or do you feel like your style translates 100% digitally?
I mean, at this point, I feel like I'm pretty comfortable drawing digitally. I think when I draw on paper, it just kind of has a different quality to it. Just has more of a texture to it, when you draw on paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I like looking at some artists, like for instance, like Francis Manipul. Like I think he's 100% digital now. I don't think he does anything traditional anymore. And I find that while his stuff still, it still looks like Francis Manipul's work, it's not 100% like his traditional work. Like to me, like my eye says there's something different here. My eye can detect that it is digital, and there's just a difference in line, like you said, there's some more texture or something like that, like when you work traditionally. Like I would say the same thing, and like there's a sharpness that I can get with certain lines that I can't necessarily get, you know, depending, you know, it's just like traditional. I feel like there's this technique that I can use quite good like traditionally, but when I try to do it digitally it doesn't translate 100%.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. With new technology comes new ways to use it and new ways to harness the limitation. You know, Scott and I were just, I think it was you and I that were just talking about this, about the subtle difference in recording digitally versus analog in going into the red, right? Because when you record to tape, back when we recorded to tape, because, you know, I've been in the band forever and recorded analog, recorded digital, etc., pushing it to the red is okay. Like if you push a tape into the red, into the area you shouldn't go, it can yield some pretty cool results. It can yield like tape distortion. And as long as you're not maxing everything out and making it sound completely terrible, it's going to work. Where like digital, the second you go into the red, you are doing something bad. You cannot mess with the red. But the cool thing about digital is that you can take an audio signal that's faint and blow it up 1,000% with no loss in fidelity, where like on tape, there's no way you pull that off.
When you say going into the red, that's at the point when the audio becomes, is it like too loud and it becomes distorted? Is that what that means?
It's exactly, it's technically maxed out. But again, when you talk about analog systems, so I mean, you know, the easiest way to picture it is those old, Rory, this might be even too old for you, man. I don't know. But like the old stereo systems that would have like the green range and then a yellow range and then a red range off to the right. And so you watch the needle kind of get the 1 second. You might want to mute yourself, Rory. There's like some noise or something like that.
A drag racer.
Yeah, it sounded like basically a laundry machine trying to take over the planet. So yeah. Just trigger on and off when you want to talk. But yeah, so pushing it into the red used to be a great thing because people who were really good at audio knew how to treat tape distortion and audio distortion as almost another instrument, where on the digital realm, you just can't do that. So basically, once you get above this certain threshold, and again, in every recording program, you'll see it go into the red and you're like, I want no part of that. What was the thing I wanted to ask? Oh, Rory, it sounded like you had a question about maybe tactile. It sounded like you were going to ask me a question on tactile.
Oh, I think I was just gonna ask, because you were talking about like using old technology. So I was just gonna ask if you ever write on a typewriter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't write on a typewriter, but something I did do recently that I
do you have a typewriter?
Close. I don't. But
that's
what
I do
do
that's not something that you collect, like old forms of word processing machines.
Man, I collect so much shit. It's a shock that I haven't gotten to that. And for all I know, I'll listen back to this in 3 years and I'll turn to my right and I'll have 17 goddamn typewriters.
Shelves full of typewriters. And
so yeah, the best way to say it is not yet. Not yet. Okay. But what I will do is I actually just did a freehand writing experiment a while ago. I finished the first kind of the 0.5th draft of a novel by writing it all freehand, which was fun. It was fun to write stuff in freehand and just explore that as kind of like a first draft, a pencil sketch phase, but on the writing side. It was really interesting.
Yeah. Were you getting like wrist cramps from all that writing?
I did have to kind of dial it down after a while, which is interesting. Yeah. It's interesting to get to the point where you reach like a physical limitation where you're like, shit, man, my hand hurts. You know, I guess I've written enough for the day.
Because I feel like that would happen to me sometimes when I used to draw more on paper, like when I was drawing old Kadoja issues. For anyone who doesn't know, the first few issues of Kadoja I drew with Keith, and I remember I would sort of get like cramping in my hand back then. I don't really get it so much nowadays that work mostly digitally, or
Yeah,
pretty
me
much
neither.
all digitally. It doesn't really happen anymore, but it used to happen on paper. I don't know why that is, that it doesn't
That's
happen
interesting.
anymore. Maybe it's because
I mean,
it
must be
like the way that I
friction
draw
or
now. Yeah,
right?
or maybe it's because like the monitor that I draw on, because I have one of those Cintiq monitors that you draw directly on, and it's pretty upright. It's pretty vertical. It's like, up here. So maybe it's my hand position that's like more upright. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I draw on my iPad. I don't get that either.
Yeah.
I
mean,
agree.
that is interesting because it is kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So, did you used to get it when you would draw on paper more? Did you? Yeah.
Yeah. I would get it. And I would always be drawing on a lap board essentially. So it'd be kind of like at a, kind of like a 45-degree angle, while in the lap. And I would guess the same for my iPad, because I usually will sit on the couch. I'll throw a pillow on my lap and I'll put my iPad on top of that and kind of work that way. Yeah, but I don't find that I get those cramps in my hand either. So, which is a good thing.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Keith, did we get
because the motion is the same? All you're really missing is friction.
Yeah.
Keith, did we get to your first thing?
We didn't yet. We're just.
Oh, okay.
Nah, man, we're vibing.
Yeah, it's a good riff.
Yeah. So I mean, we're about to. Yeah, good riff, right? So yeah, we'll get to my first thing, which was I continue to have a lot of heat around this idea. It started, Scott knows this, Rory knows it just a little bit because we'll get to that. But it started as just this wild idea. I misread a comic title while I was digging for comics. And I was like, oh, interesting comic. And then I picked it up again and I was like, wait, that's not the title of the comic at all. But that would be a cool title for a comic. And it started with the title, hooked into my brain, turned into a character, turned into a world. And what I really worked on a lot this week was turning that character and world into a story. And it's interesting. I don't know if you guys are like this. I used to equate this in terms of songs, but I think recipes can also be this way. Like there are certain songs where I could make it 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and just continue to add things. I could have bass and guitars and multiple melody lines. And for whatever reason, the song always worked. It could sustain a lot of weight. And then there were some songs where I just knew there's no way this thing is worth being more than 2 minutes long. It can't sustain the weight. It can only take on certain things. And I think certain recipes are like that, right? Like there's gumbo where you can just throw, goddamn anything in and it works. And then there's other areas where no, this is the idea and it's complete as is. It can't really take on any more weight. And the riveting thing about this new idea is that every time I feel like I can throw more weight on it, it works. So I came up with even weirder, crazier stuff about how to tell the story, and it involves all kinds of kind of different wild things, but it seems like the story can sustain it. So I'm really excited about that because I'm very close to sitting down and scripting out the page level outline of what's going to be this one shot. And then, if I like it, people like it, maybe I go more from there. But this is where Rory comes in a little bit. And again, you can look, man, if life changes and you walk this back, it's fine. But I was thinking, okay, I need character designs. I don't have any character design. So I'd really love to see this character design. And so I hit Rory up, again, through no, that's just a total coincidence compared to, this podcast. But I said, hey man, would you be interested in doing character designs? I'm not here to ask you to do the art, but maybe you could design the characters so I can give them off to an artist and just do some things. And you were like, yeah, sure. You're like, yeah, I'll give it a try. Just out of curiosity, what is it? What's the title or what's the character? And then I told him the title. So Rory, nobody knows the title. I'm just, you and I know, and Scott knows because I've told him, but I told you the title.
So you're not saying it here.
Cool.
Right.
Nope. Not saying
you're
it.
Not
here.
saying
not
it.
saying it here,
okay.
But yeah. So nope, exactly. But I told you, and you were like, yeah. So, last I checked, I think you might have some time over the next couple weeks to do a character design of this character. And then I'll go from there. So it continues to have its own momentum. Again, this is now as long as I continue and make this is going to be the second year in a row where I've just had this unplanned idea kind of smack me upside the head and demand my attention. It's probably going to move to the front of the queue. I actually checked the idea with both the Invader team, or at least with Mike, and also checked it with a couple other people I know, just riffing. And what I'm fascinated about with the idea is both my wife and one of my kids randomly brought it up without me prompting. They were like, "Oh, this thing would be cool for like that comic you thought of." And I was like, "Oh, wow, you remembered that." So again, I'm happy. It feels like it has a lot of promise. Again, is the closest thing I will ever do to making a superhero comic. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And as of recently, that influences that character. And Rory and Scott, that's something I'll happily talk about offline with both of you in different contexts. But anyway, it's been fun, lots of promise, and yeah, maybe we'll get some character sketches together soon. So really excited about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think your audio is lagging a little
so
bit.
With that aircraft thing you did this week, is there anything that you want to talk about?
Yeah, Keith, I think you're lagging
Keith,
a bit.
you still there? Scott, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, is his screen frozen?
Yes, it looks like his screen is frozen.
Yeah, he's looking crazy too in this.
Okay, yeah, it looks like he's ready to kiss somebody.
Yeah, he looks like Popeyes. He looks like Popeye's drunk uncle.
Yeah. Well, should we keep going? Oh, there he is. He's back.
I'm back, baby. Yeah. Did you hear
that
was the question or no?
What's that?
Was the like, what was the one thing or one thing you want to talk about for this week, just in case I like bomb out and just sit here in black silence again?
That would be on you, Rory. Yeah, so I went first. So you're next, but yeah, just in case you didn't notice, so Keith holds stuff very close to the vest until it's ready to come out. So he won't talk about like projects, like kind of what they're about more or less, until it's ready to come out, and then he'll start dishing that info. But yeah, so I went first, Keith went second. So what about you? What was the big creative thing you did this week?
What did I do this week? Well, the main thing that I do is, like I mentioned before, I'm a storyboard artist. So I work from home full time as a board artist. And that's sort of the primary thing that I worked on within the last week was doing storyboards. But aside from that, I'm continuing with my graphic novel series, The Mighty Hunters of Mithria. So that book is volume 1, and now I'm currently working on volume 2. So my sort of my long-term plan is to make three books. It's going to be a trilogy. So yeah, volume 1 took a while. It took like 3 years. I'm working on volume 2 now, so hopefully it'll be done in maybe 3 years. Maybe hopefully not longer than 3 years. But it's a long process, and it's probably going to be about the same length, like 200 pages, maybe a little more.
Oh wow!
But yeah, so I'm just sort of slowly chipping away at that. Right now, I'm in the inking phase, the digital inking phase of working on that. I've roughed out the whole book already. Sort of did like a thumbnail pass, so like very rough, just like scribbles, a scribbly version of the whole book. Then as I'm like working back through it, I like go on a page and do like a bit tighter, like pencil pass of it, and then just like go straight into inking. So like from the thumbnail stage, I'll go to pencils and then inks. This is all digital pencils and inks.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like we have very similar processes when it comes to that. So you thumbnailed out 200 pages roughly.
Yeah. And so, like I said, it's very rough. It's like scribbles. It's like some of it, when I go back to it, I'm like, what was that supposed to be? Because it's just like a blob.
Sometimes when I do that, I'll write something because I know it's shit. It's just like, I don't know what this is, or like, for instance,
this is a dragon.
Yeah. And so like, for instance, I had a lab scene and I just wrote crazy lab. It was just like, I'll figure the angle out like like I just like, here's the panel, and I just wrote Crazy Lab, and then I just kept going.
Yeah, and you got to like add in all those details of the lab equipment and that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's like on the first pass, it's not something I'm interested in doing. It's just like, okay, let's storyboard the whole thing out. Let's lay everything out first, and then we can get to work on it. So like, okay, doing 200 thumbnails, like how long is that process? Because I know it takes me maybe a day or two to do, you know, like a 20 to 24 page story, like depending how good the flow is going. Sometimes maybe it's a day, but usually it's a couple of days. How long would 200 pages do or take?
I think I got through it pretty quick. Like maybe, I don't remember exactly, maybe about a week. I don't think it was more than a week to do the thumbnails. But then, I mean, where I really spend the time is, you know, going back over and putting in all the detail. That's really where the time comes from. Right now I'm working on a scene that's like sort of a lot of crowd shot panels. So like the pages that I'm working on right now are taking a long time because I have several panels where I have, you know, like 20, 30 characters in it, you know. So, you know, the farther into the background, the less detail.
Yeah.
The ones in the foreground, because it's like I have like the villain character has like mind control powers. So he's sort of like hypnotizing this crowd of people. And like the other characters like walking through the crowd of people that are hypnotized. So so these pages that I'm working on right now are taking a bit of time. But
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Fun. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, and obviously you're going to be a lot quicker than me. I mean, like it's literally your day job to storyboard. So yeah, I'd imagine the thumbnail part of the process is kind of like old hat to you at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, like doing storyboards, it's like it's really all about drawing fast, like getting as many drawings done as you can per day. Because sometimes it's really quick turnarounds. You know, sometimes I'll do a scene and then they'll get back to me like, hey, can you change this part of the scene and send it back to us by the end of the day? And, you know, so then I gotta do stuff quickly. So yes, I generally do work fairly quickly, I think.
Yeah, 3 years is pretty good, I think, for a project that size, like 200 plus pages. So that's pretty decent, you know, especially since it's like kind of like a passion project, side hustle thing that you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I actually have a couple questions. I guess my most curious question is, Rory, like, you know, like we obviously worked together for a long time. We did, like you said, kind of 10 issues of Kadoja and the bulk of the first issue of Three Protectors kind of all in that same time. And then you went on to, I mean, countless animation companies. It felt like every time I talked to you, you had moved on to a new animation company. And I know that things move fast in that industry. And then you came back to comics. And so, like, what was it about this story or about coming back to comics? Like, what kind of compelled you to come back to comics and tell this story in that way?
I think I just got to a point where, you know, I was, you know, spent a long time just, you know, doing drawings and posting them on Instagram, just like single drawings. And then, you know, after a while I was like, okay, I want to make a story, make my own story. And so since I have an animation background and had also done comic book stuff, it was kind of like, okay, I want to make a story. I can either make like an animated short or I could make a comic. And it was kind of an easy decision for me. I was like, I'm going to make a comic because I've animated before. You know, I went to school for animation and it's very tedious work. I didn't really want to do all the work that would be required to make an animated short, even though like the end result is really cool and satisfying, like seeing your drawings like come to life and be animated. That's really cool. But when I worked on Kadoja with you, I had a lot of fun doing that. And I enjoyed that medium. I like drawing panels and those pages and thinking about the composition of the page and the storytelling and all that. And so yeah, it was an easy decision for me to want to do a comic rather than an animated short. yeah, that's sort of how it started. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I apologize because I definitely, the internet gods have been playing with me during some of this recording, but so I may have
Okay.
missed this, but and I kind of remember this. Did you have a vision for multiple volumes of Mighty Hunters of Mithria? Is it 3? Is that right? Do I have that right? Or 2 more?
Yes.
Is what's your vision there?
Yeah. Two. Yeah. Yeah. Long-term plan is to do a trilogy, 3 graphic novels.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm working on the second one currently, and I'm about a little more than halfway through inking it at this point.
Oh wow.
Yes.
And when
And then
That's
do you have
quick.
any, I mean, probably don't have any hard goals, but like when do you expect that second volume is going to be out?
I mean, hopefully I'll have it done by 2026. If I were
Oh
to
my
if I were to
God.
like estimate right now, like
Yeah.
2026. I don't know at what point during the year, but hopefully at some point during that year. That's sort of the goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
What,
You then me.
when did you start it? You said you're about halfway done inking it, so that's wild. A
Yeah.
100 pages inked is, dude, you're moving.
Yeah, I think
So
I'm up to, yeah, I think I'm on like 150, page 150 right now, something like that.
Holy
But
cow.
I wrote the script in let me see, I have it right here. I finished the script in October of 2022. And so then I
Okay.
think so that's about when I started like thumbnailing and stuff like that. Was
Yeah,
about
you're moving
October
really
of
quick,
20.
and then so I would say, like, I think art wise, I think you'll be done very quickly if that's how fast you're moving. But so it's the color aspect. Is that what takes the longest? What's the longest part of your process? Because you're pretty much doing everything, right? You're doing the writing,
Yeah.
the art,
Hmm.
and the coloring, and the lettering as well.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think like on the first one, I think probably the coloring took the longest, if I remember correctly. Yeah, because um because some panels I'll only draw, some panels I only draw the character and there's no background, and then I'm like, I'll worry about the background once I get to coloring. I can like color some stuff in there, and
Hmm.
so yeah, I think the coloring takes the longest.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
How do you,
adding in, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, how do you stay motivated? I
You
mean,
know,
that's a long timeline, and I can speak for like Scott and me. It's like I love the dope story. I would need to release that in single issues along the way so that I
mhm,
can get a little bit of like feedback or get the story
yeah,
out there, etc. What keeps you going through such a long kind of ramp up period there?
yeah, yeah. A couple people have asked me that actually, like at another convention I did. Like I think a couple people who sort of like wanted to make their own comics asked me something similar, like, how do you get the motivation to like make a comic or whatever? And I told them like, well, as soon as I found an idea that I was excited about, then it was easy. Like I was
Hmm.
excited as soon as I found like a story and the characters that I was excited about drawing. Then from that point, it wasn't hard. I just I wanted to do it. I was excited about working on it. So yeah, that's what I would say. I would say to them is like, once you find an idea that excites you, and then it becomes easy. Uh, yeah, I don't know.
Was Kadoja the first book you drew? Was that the first comic you did?
That was yes, that was the first comic that I did. Before that
Eh,
I did, or no, yeah, that was the first comic I did. I did some
Okay.
comics when I was a kid, Eggman. When I was like 10 years old, that was my first comic that I drew, is a superhero egg. But in terms of my adult years, yes, Kadoja.
How did you guys connect? Like, I'm Keith. I'm sure you've told me this, but my memory's shit. So, how did you guys meet? And Like, what made you go, yeah, I feel like doing a comic? Like, was that something you had already thought of, like, prior to meeting Keith and, like, connecting? Or was Keith mentioning comics the first time you're like, oh, I've never really thought about doing comics?
Well, here, I'll tell you from my perspective how we met, and then we can hear Keith's perspective of how we met. So, I was living in Brooklyn. I was doing a friend of mine that I went to college with. He was like hosting these hip hop dance parties in Brooklyn, and since he knew
It was
I was
just
good at
you
drawing,
two in the living room.
yeah, exactly.
Dance party. Yeah.
Dance party. He was hosting these dance parties in Brooklyn, and he knew I was good at drawing. So he was like, hey, would you want to like draw flyers for me that we would like send out digitally and like post on Facebook and stuff? So I started doing these illustrations for flyers for his dance parties. So they were very kind of like hip hop style illustrations, like drawings of people breakdancing and stuff like that. I'm also a former breakdancer, not to brag, but in case you guys were wondering. But yeah, so I was doing that. I did that for like a couple of years, and then a friend of his was a guy who, so this other guy like saw the flyers that I was doing, and then got in touch with me and was like, "Hey, I know this guy, or me and this other guy like want to do a giant monster comic, and we're looking for an illustrator. Or would that be something you're interested in?" And at the time I wouldn't have necessarily considered myself like a Godzilla fan, I guess, but the idea of drawing giant monsters sounded cool and fun. So I was like, yeah, sure. So then I met with that guy and we talked a little bit about it. And then I sort of did like some sample artwork. I did like one initial piece of artwork of the giant monster, just sort of like walking through the city. And then I don't remember if me and Keith talked through email first, or I don't remember exactly what happened.
That's
but then I think the first time we met in person was in New York, right? I think, did you come for New York Comic Con? Was that why you came to town? Yeah. And then me, Keith, and our mutual friend Lance, we like went out to a bar after Comic Con, and I remember I was showing them a bunch of like character design sketches for the characters in the comic. And then we sort of just kept going from there. Yeah. And I remember it was originally like, they were originally referring to it as Colossus, like Project Colossus or something like that. And then, the name Kadoja.
Yeah, man.
Came a little bit later.
Nice.
Yeah. I'll give my version of that.
Okay.
Right. Which is, so Lance, so mentioned, but the second mutual friend, the person was like a buddy of mine and I are doing a giant monster comic. That was Lance. And so from my perspective, Lance and I got to know each other through Scheme Richards, because my band Big Pimp Jones, we had done, I guess Scheme had approached us about doing a hip hop single for this party, this funk party that he was doing called Hot Peas and Butter. And so we released a single with Scheme. We were actually the Hot Peas and Butter band. Lance was the person who did the art. So then, of course, I got to know Lance. And then Lance and I just sort of vibed and talked about stuff. And then, again, Scott's heard this story, but I had a album that was a fake Godzilla soundtrack fall through the record label. And then I was like, well, this is a great soundtrack. I need to do something with it. So I was like, fuck it, I'll write a comic. So then I kind of wrote the comic, and Lance and I were talking about it. We were talking about an artist search. And we had found this guy to do some prints and stuff for what amounted to Kadoja. But it turned out that the dude was like a big time swipe artist. And so I was like, well, I'm not selecting shit anymore. Like what ideas do you have? And then he said, I know this guy who did party flyers for some stuff. And he's got like this dope style. I think he'd be a great fit for Kadoja. So I said, send me his art. And I remember that there was a piece that you did, Rory, that was the one that sold the gig, which was, it was something involving people sort of driving away in a Jeep with a Yeti. And that was the closest thing you had done to anything giant monster at the time. And what I loved was not only how you did the Yeti, but your use of perspective, because what you did was you put the camera on the ground. so that the Jeep and the Yeti were, just massive. But it was the fact that you had created this amazing quote camera angle for the piece. And I was like, if this guy can do this with stuff like a Yeti, I can't wait to see what he does with giant monsters. And they
Nice. Rory, so
that's where we started to.
Uh-oh.
Nice. So Rory, at that point, did you already go to school for animation, or was that something in the pipeline that was coming up?
Yeah, so that was all after I was done with college. That was
okay.
Yeah, I graduated college in 2006, and I think we started Kadoja in 2010. Is that right, Keith? 2010 or 11?
10, 11, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a few years after I was out of school, and at the time I was not working in animation. I had gone through a period where I was sort of having trouble finding work in New York, and I sort of was just feeling discouraged about working in animation at that time. And I had no money, and I just needed a full-time job doing something. So I ended up becoming a cake decorator. So I was working full-time as a cake decorator at that time. And I was doing some freelance children's book illustration stuff on the side. And that was right around the time when the whole Kadoja thing happened. Yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're currently at Illumination, correct?
So I had a question.
Oh, good.
Yes, I'm at Illumination.
I will let you know I'm on a lag. Okay. So yeah. Yeah, go.
Okay. So before Illumination, you were at how long have you been at Illumination?
Now it's been about a year and a half. Yeah.
Okay. And then before that, you were at.
Before that, I was at Netflix. I worked at several studios. Before that, I was at Netflix. Before Netflix, I was at Disney TV. I worked on the Proud Family at Disney. Before that, I was at DreamWorks, where I worked on Troll Hunters. Actually, when I was on the Troll Hunters, I worked on they made sort of a movie, a Troll Hunters movie. It was kind of like a series finale, movie episode called Rise of the Titans, which actually had three. I don't know if you saw it, Keith or Scott. It had 3 giant monsters in it. And I got to storyboard a sequence where a giant robot fights a giant monster in a river. It felt very much like Pacific Rim. And I remember at the time when I was working on it, I wished that I could text Keith to tell him you won't believe what I'm working on. But yeah, and before that, I worked on a couple of Disney Junior shows. I worked on Teen Titans Go at Warner Brothers.
Oh, nice.
One show. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I should have asked you that at the top of the hour. But
that's okay. No problem. Yeah, we're getting to it now.
Yeah, I was very curious about it and kind of your journey, because I know when you stopped working with Keith, it was because you started with DreamWorks. Is that right?
At that time, I was starting with Warner Brothers on Teen Titans Go. So yeah, I worked on Kadoja for several years with Keith, and then it sort of got to a point where I decided, I had been out of the animation industry for several years, and then I got to the point where I was kind of you know what, I want to get back into animation, and I'm really interested in storyboarding, so I want to do that. And I also really want to work on movies. I want to work in feature animation as a storyboard artist. So I was if I'm going to do that, I'm probably going to have to move to California. I was living in New York at the time. So I spent a few months sort of making a new portfolio, making a new website with a bunch of storyboard samples and some character design stuff. And then started looking for animation work again. And so I first got a job at an animation studio in New York, Titmouse. And I was working on a Disney Junior show called Goldie and Bear, which ran for 2 seasons. So that was my first storyboarding job, was in New York. and then after that, then I worked on a CBS show. It was a Stephen Colbert produced show called Our Cartoon President, and so I was working on that at the CBS studios in New York. That was a short job. That was like 3-4 months or something like that. And then so the whole time I was working on those shows, I was trying to make connections in California because I wanted to move out to California. And over time, I eventually did make some connections. I got some freelance work on Teen Titans Go, which then ultimately led to them offering me an in-house job. So I was like, great, I'm going to move to California. And then, so that was the point at which I like wrote to Keith and our mutual friend Lance. And I was kind of like, look, guys, like I don't know if I can do Kadoja anymore because I'm moving and like I'm really going to pursue animation. So that's what I've been doing ever since is working in animation and working my way up the chain, you know. Maybe one day I'll be a director or something like that. I don't know if I'm necessarily interested in that. Right now I enjoy storyboarding and making comics. I'm happy with where I'm at the moment. But yeah, I still love making comics though. I think it's super fun. And it's actually very similar to storyboarding. It's sequential art, comics and storyboards.
When you're doing your storyboards, are you required? Well, I don't. Is it a project by project thing? But are you required to do full color, or are you just doing like the pencil ink work stage of it? Like, how much of the product do they want to see fully rendered, or kind of the basics of how the character would move and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, in general, storyboards are pretty rough and usually just black and white, grayscale. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of color. You know, if I'm storyboarding a scene that has like fire in it or something, like maybe I'll color in the fire orange just so that it's clear, like this is fire. But for the most part, it's very rough. A lot of times the drawings aren't completely finished. They're kind of sketchy. Usually it's just about getting stuff done quickly. Just so that it's visually clear enough for people to understand what's happening in the scene, you know. But yeah, it's nothing, not finished, polished artwork, just loose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on, man. All right, for Illumination, so we know that we're not allowed to ask you what you're working on right now. Is this your first project with them, or have you finished something with them already that's yet to be released, or have you worked on something that has already been released?
I have not worked on anything that's been released at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Those are all the questions I had. Keith, did you have anything?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what kind of delay I'm on. Like when I'll see when you
right now it
seems
okay.
Okay. Yeah. My Wi-Fi and I are going to have some words after this.
My wife.
But anyway, so yeah. So for now, I wanted to know, Rory, like how if any way has doing storyboards affected the way you make comics? Has it had an effect? You just said they were similar, but like has a lot of doing a lot of work, getting a lot of reps in storyboards changed the way you do comics, affected them in any way?
Well, I think when I'm drawing the comics, I'm thinking about them. Like I'm thinking about the drawings that I'm doing in terms of, I'm almost imagining it as an animated movie that I'm watching in my head. So the stuff that I'm drawing, I'm sort of thinking about it in terms of like a cinematic shot that I would see on screen. But I think I've sort of always kind of thought that way about it. Like even when I was doing Kadoja, like before I was working storyboards, I think I was sort of thinking that way about it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's any specific things that I've taken from storyboarding that I've used with comic book illustration though.
Number one is that speed. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, that's true. The speedy fingers. That's one thing.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's a great talent to have, just like over the years, like, I was averaging not even a page a week for years. It would take me like 2 weeks to do one page. And I was just so slow. I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get quicker than this. This sucks. And then eventually it got to, once I kind of learned how to pace things out, it's just like, okay, well, it's so daunting to get 22 to 28 pages done in a book, and I kind of had to tell myself, well, take it just one panel at a time. If you do one panel a day, at least you'll keep moving, and you'll increase your speed. You're going to be faster than one page every 2 weeks. You'll maybe a page a week. Maybe that's and that became an obtainable goal. And that was my whole thing, was panel a day. You do a panel a day, that's 64, 65 pages a year. Okay, that's 3 comic books. You can do that. And now just with the reps, the added reps, doing it for basically like 13 years, 12, 13 years, it's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm finally at the place where, the speed has finally come. It was just a matter of time. And it's those, that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour thing. You do something long enough, you're going to get good at it to where you're not, just sitting there thinking constantly. You're doing more than you're thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So I guess with that, I mean, it's time to get into we're kind of at the hour mark here, and we've gotten to the world famous, if galaxy famous, Breaking the Bullshit. So I don't know, Scott, why don't you lead, and then we'll see if Rory has any bullshit. You got any bullshit you want to share with us?
Yeah, man. So I'm working on the home office, and it is like, if you guys have ever seen a picture or a video or something, usually there was a bookcase behind me, and it is now gone. So I actually have 2 display cases. I got some Batman, Nightwing statues there. I got a Hellboy signed Mike Mignola hand, Adam Eve, Thor, Stan Lee signed Thor hammer. So I got my display cases back there now. I have a spinner rack directly right here, and I could just pull books right off of the shelf, And so before, my home office was a tomb in which I would be buried under a San Diego earthquake. Now there were bookcases all along this wall and all along this wall. Now I had moved them all along this space here. So my entire comic collection is on this side of the room, and it's so much more well organized, and I got so much shit in storage now. So that's kind of been the big project this week, and it's really pulling together. It feels so much more spacious, and so that's kind of my creative comic thing in the Bringing the Bullshit was like, let's get the feng shui right in this place, because it wasn't.
Absolutely. How about you?
Are
Rory?
those all up on the top of your shelf over there? Are those all comic boxes?
Yeah, so
that's all.
So these are all IKEA Calexes, and so all of the bottom rows here, the 3 bottom rows, these are all filled with comic books, and then all short boxes across the top here. And let me see, it's hard for you guys to see. There we go.
Oh man, you got a big collection, huh?
Yes. So I got, my Akira box set right there. I got a couple of figures. I have, my Lakers signed basketballs, Kareem, team balls, stuff like that, and more comics. And like my art supplies are behind that curtain right there. It is very messy, so it's just like, let's put a curtain up to hide it, so it's not on camera and looking crazy. And then I have some pieces from my comics and other things. So that is a Steve Rude drawing. He goes to a small convention in San Diego called San Diego Comic Fest, and so you can get a lot of FaceTime with him there. And so I showed him my book, and he goes, hey, yeah, you have a sketch pad? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, yeah, bring it over. And so came over with a sketch pad and a pencil, and he was looking at the cover, and like number one, he looked at my pencil, which was a mechanical pencil. I use a mechanical pencil. Jim Lee uses a mechanical pencil. Brett Booth uses a mechanical pencil. I'm like, I get it. They're sharp. You never have to sharpen them. They're always pointy. Works. Okay.
Yeah.
So
hey,
Steve Rude,
whatever works for you.
Yeah, but Steve Rude said, get yourself respectable pencils. And so he looked at my cover. It was like second shift number 8. I had this character, Bayani Man. He's like a Filipino Superman character. And he's looking at the cover and he goes, the character would look a little more dynamic if you did it this way. And so he redrew the cover position of the main character in that issue. And he signed it to me and put his signature on it. So I have it hanging on the wall there. It's pretty awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my stuff.
You mentioned that. That's cool. You mentioned when you were showing your shelf, you mentioned the Akira comics. Those were like some of those were some of the main comics that really like got me interested in drawing comics. Was the Akira books?
Oh yeah.
Seeing those drawings and like all the detail and stuff. And I think it was like right around the time that I started working on Kadoja with Keith that I like was reading the Akira graphic novels, and I just loved those. I was so amazed by them.
The detail is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Otomo had assistants, but they say he didn't have assistants. But I think their word is there were assistants and stuff. But I mean, like I don't know who drew what, but those buildings, and I think it's usually the assistants handle the backgrounds. But I think he did some of them to kind of give them an idea of what he wanted them to look like, and I don't know how much he did or didn't do, but man, those backgrounds, they're just it's breathtaking. It's just like, dude, how are you doing this? Like, this doesn't even make sense. This feels like a computer generated this somehow. Like it doesn't look like it could be done by a man-made drawing. Like it just doesn't seem right to me. It's just so crazy.
That was always one of the things that I disliked drawing the most was buildings. Just so many straight lines, drawing all the windows, the straight vertical lines, horizontal lines. Like like how we were talking earlier about like preferring to draw more natural, organic stuff that doesn't not based in reality, like dinosaurs or whatever. I'd always rather draw a dinosaur than a building.
The detail that they put in those buildings and the fact that so many of them look so different than the other buildings, it's just like you really had to put some thought in it. So like, I mean, I try to do it to a degree, but I really do hate drawing them. But I will do it because it's part of the process. You need to have that setting, that scene setting in there. And so I'll try to make some of the buildings look different from like the ones right next to each other. It's like usually if there's two buildings next to each other, I won't draw them the same because I want to have that differential between. But, if you look at other blocks, they look like the previous blocks because it's just like I'm doing a lot of the buildings off the top of my head. Like every once in a while, I'm like, all right, let's put like a San Diego, because my book takes place in San Diego where I'm from. It's like, okay, let's look up some San Diego, landmarks real quick. And then we'll throw those in there just to change it up a bit. But, overall, it's just for me, the buildings are not what I would say people that read my book are looking for. I don't think they're going to my book and going like, let's see what Scott did with these backgrounds here. Like that's not. So it's just kind of like you churn and burn those out, make them look as nice as possible. But really the focus is what the characters are doing, their interactions, the fighting, that kind of stuff. Like I feel like that's the main focus. Where Wanders though, like some depending what part of the story they're in, the background does take, it's part of it all. It's just like, okay, this is kind of like the villain's lair, and it's very He-Man. It's very like, I can't remember Skeletor's. Oh, Snake Mountain. He had Snake Mountain, right?
Right.
So, and then like Castle Grayskull. It looks like a more fucked up version of Castle Grayskull than it would Snake Mountain. But, it's kind of like, it's part of the setting. It makes it feels the scene out, like you can feel the vibe just by looking at the background. So depending on what book I'm doing, that takes more of an effect as well.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So Rory, how about you? You have any bullshit you want to share?
Let's see. Well, we got free comic book day coming up on Saturday, right? And me and Keith, I think, are actually going to the same comic shop in Rancho Cucamonga to have our tables set up where we'll be selling our goodies. So I was, for that, I wanted to have something free to give away at my table. So I was like, okay, I'll just order some stickers of like some drawings that I did or something. and my stickers have been delayed. I ordered my stickers like 2 weeks ago, and I haven't gotten them yet. I'm hoping to get them this week, but I think I received a shipping notification today. But like I ordered stickers of. I was like, well, since I have the Mighty Hunters, which is sort of He-Man inspired, I had done these prints of. I have Skeletor.
Oh, that's cool. That's badass, dude.
Nice.
And I have.
Do you know Cheeks?
Also. I do actually. Yes.
That looked very Cheeks-esque.
Oh,
there's
yeah,
some of that vibe in there.
His work.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Like He-Man.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's dope.
So I ordered these two as stickers, like round stickers. So hopefully I'll have those to give away at Free Comic Book Day on Saturday, if they get here in time. So yeah, I'm just waiting on that. That's about it, though. Yeah, that's the only thing I got going on at the moment.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anything that you've picked up at the store? Any new toy that you got, or do you collect comics on the regular, or
no, not regularly. Let me think. What's the last comic I bought? I think the last comic I bought was probably a Batman hardcover. It might have been this. I think this might have been the last comic I bought.
Jorge Jimenez is dope, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like he's the whole reason that I buy these hardcover books, just because I love his artwork so much. And yeah, in terms of like what comics I'll generally read, it's always based on the artist. Like, it doesn't even matter what the title is. Like, if it's an artist I like, then like I'll buy it. You know, like even if it's a character, like like Thor, who's like I've generally not been that interested in buying Thor comics, but if Jimenez starts drawing Thor, then like I'm gonna start buying Thor because I love his art so much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel that. Like me and Keith were talking about this last week. So my collection is probably double this, but what I did was I went through the titles and I pulled the issues where I bought it because of the artist. And then I was like, oh, I'm interested in the story. So I kept reading it. So I kept buying the issues, right? And so I just went through, and as soon as my favorite artist stopped, I just put the ones that weren't him in a box. And so I did that for all of my series. So essentially my whole wall it's bangers only. It's just like my favorite artists, like the whole wall is just my favorite artists. So but I do have favorite writers. So like anything Rick Remender puts out, I'll pick up. So, and he generally works with amazing artists. Like, I don't think there's a book he's done where I was like, I don't know about this. So he has a really good eye. Him and Mark Miller, they have really good eyes. So I pick up a lot of their stuff, Miller's stuff too. And so essentially that's most of the wall. It's just badass artists.
And what's the most recent comic that you've purchased? Do you buy comics every week? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm a pull list guy at SoCal Comics. I have my books there, and my list dwindles because I find that a lot of the books I read are from Image Comics, and a lot of them are shorts. So it's usually six issues and they're done. But if like Daniel Warren, like you said, it's like you find an artist, you get what they want, you get what they're putting out. Like me and Keith just did a Patreon exclusive episode where we talked about Sean Gordon Murphy's Zorro. Oh yeah.
I can give two fucks about Zorro, but I love Sean Gordon Murphy, so I'm going to pick up the book.
Exactly. Yeah, I love his work too. He's doing Ninja Turtles. Have you seen on his Instagram recently?
I saw a sketch.
Ninja Turtle drawings.
Oh shit! I didn't know. I didn't know if he was just messing around or what. Like, but if he does Ninja Turtles, I'm picking that up.
Yeah, I don't really know either if he's just doing like a whole series or a one shot, or if he's just doing like a couple pages of artwork. But like, I love Ninja Turtles and I love Sean Gordon Murphy, so whatever he's doing, like I want that.
Yeah, I know they just finished the IDW just finished the regular series at 150 issues, so they're probably just going to relaunch it. And if Sean Gordon Murphy's doing the first issue or two, I'm going to pick it up anyway. But if he's doing it, I'm on top of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Keith?
Did you have?
Do you buy comics every week, Keith?
I have a whole list as well, so I'm not going to say I managed to visit my comic shop every week, but yeah, I have a pull list. But like Scott, it gets smaller and smaller, and you know, I just talked about this, I think, on a recent podcast. I'm getting more and more into the idea of graphic novels, just because I love the idea of turning around and seeing like kind of the spines on the shelves, so I know that collected story is there. It's more of like a function of my future life, where like the idea of storing books on a shelf has more appeal than putting them in a short box or a long box, right? So we'll see. But I still collect a bunch, maybe 6 to 8 titles a month, and then you know there's just always the old comics that I love buying for similar reasons. Just you know, go grab those old comics.
It's so weird that you don't like Thor.
Well,
I feel like I only say that because of the He-Man influence, and in your book it's like Thor is very He-Man, like
I guess you have a point there
for that world. I don't know if you've read
Thor was never Thor. The only time I was interested in Thor comics was when I don't remember the name of the story run, but it was Olivier Coipel he did a Thor run for a while.
Yeah, he's amazing.
So I was interested in those because I like his artwork.
Did you read the God of Thunder with Mahmoud Asrar? That is so good. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's quite possibly one of the best Thor stories I've ever read.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's excellent.
I'll have to look for it.
Something to look up. I actually initially thought you were going to say I didn't like Thor except for in Adventures of Babysitting.
Oh, that was a good one too. Yeah, I liked that appearance.
Keith, you have any bullshit to bring this week?
No. I mean, I think I'm good. I mean, I guess my one thing is that, you know, I had mentioned a couple weeks ago that I was going to kind of do a one-time amnesty for all of the novels that I had purchased. And I think there's a few graphic novels in there where it was like, okay, I get that I bought them in the past. I get that there was a reason. But present me is going to read 3 to 6 pages of this book and then decide, do I still want it or not? And I ended up thinning out a stack like that big. I was just like, this doesn't appeal to me, so I'm just going to donate it and move on with it. And now I know that, you know, that's my these two cubby hole and a half here. That's my to be read book pile. Now the comic pile is down to about, you know, maybe 1.2 short boxes. So all this stuff is about as low as it's ever been, because I love buying comics and shit more than I like reading them. But it's nice to see. And now I know that everything on there is something that like I've sort of water tested to have it be like, yeah, I totally love this thing. So anyway, so that's it.
Nice.
It was fun. It was fun to sit down with it and kind of go through it. But yeah, well, let's bring this episode to a close. So Rory, why don't you go first? Like where can people find you on social media after we talk about?
All right, cut out there. But what he was saying was, after we rate these beers, so Left Coast Brewing Company, Asylum, Belgian-style triple ale, San Clemente, California, 11.8%, 16 ounces. This was fantastic. I would have this again for sure. I feel pretty good. So, I mean, that's the 11.8 talking. And nice. I would give this 7.5. 7.5. I really like this.
Okay. I'll give my
I have no idea whether my internet works. Yeah.
Oh. I'll give this a 6.5. I probably prefer the lemon or the cherry. Those are both like 9s for me. This one 6.5, maybe 7. Maybe
is the lemon like a Sprite, or just tastes like?
No, I wouldn't call it a Sprite. It's just it just tastes lemony. There's no sugar. No sugar.
Okay. Keith, how about you?
Oh,
I think he's frozen.
Oh, okay.
I thought he was just looking lovingly down at your box. Oh, there he's moving.
Well, he had started saying before, where can people find me on social media? I'm primarily on Instagram. It's just Rory Smith Art on Instagram. Yeah, Rory Smith Art. 8.0. There we go. That's a good score.
Yeah, that beer ain't no joke. I love that. Yeah, I gave it a 8. I think last week or the week before I had it on the air. It was fantastic. And you can find me at Scott Lost, SCOTTLOST, on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, and Facebook.com/Scott Lost. And you can pick up my books at accidentalaliens.com. Second Shift, Minimum Wage Superheroes, Wanderers of Melisande, Anthropomorphic Dinosaurs versus Humans. Wanderers of Melisande and Granite are both in Astounding Adventures #1. You can find all those at accidentalaliens.com.
Nice.
Keith's moving.
Keith, is your internet working, Keith?
There he is. He is at Keith_Invader on Instagram and Threads. He does not have a Twitter. And he also wanted me to mention that we have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Making Comics Podcast, as well as a Patreon. So if you can go to patreon.com/Making Comics Podcast, you can back our Patreon there. At $1, you can get behind the scenes stuff, pictures of Keith's books and his writings and his penis drawings that he loves to do in those. And then I will give some roughs, some cover ideas coming up, different thumbnails, stuff like that. And it also says, hey, we like you. You deserve $1 a month for 4 free episodes every month. So it seems like a good deal. At $5, you get 2 extra episodes, 2 extra podcasts, Patreon exclusive episodes, that is. And for $25 and $50 a month, you can get 30 or 1 hour with Keith or I talking about your project. So if you have a comic book that you're working on and you want us to give it a look, give it a read, and let you know how you're doing, we can do that. So go to patreon.com/Making Comics Podcast.
And this was your first time doing the video version of the Making Comics Podcast, right?
Yeah, we've done the video a few times. Usually when we have a guest on, we use StreamYard, but we've never published them. So
gotcha.
Yeah. So this will definitely be our first one. So yeah, you have the inaugural video of the Making Comics Podcast. So yeah,
very cool.
Look for that on YouTube, youtube.com. I don't know if you just go /Making Comics Podcast. Who the fuck knows? You will if you look it up. So yeah, search Making Comics Podcast, and hopefully this episode will show up along with any other videos that we have.